Hi everyone and welcome back. This is part 2 of the Frozen Solitude in Grisaille. Today we'll be tackling the mountains, and the way I'm handling this is that I didn't want to use the straight black. I wanted to have a gray of sorts. It's a darker gray, but it's still noticeably lighter than black, and I'm just getting a little roll of it there to get the mountain peak started. There are going to be two mountains here. The one on the right here is going to be a little bit lighter than the one on the left, and the reasoning behind that is to indicate a sense of space and distance. I want the mountain on the right to look like it's farther away. The shape of it doesn't really matter. I'm not really paying too much attention to the individual little peaks and bumps on the ridge. I'm just trying to make it look interesting and also give it enough size. You know, it needs a sense of size. When I get to the mountain on the left, I'm going to drop the tone a little bit down toward the black. I might even use the black itself when I get there, just to make it look like it's a little bit closer. I'll probably have a little bit more contrast on that mountain as well, while I keep this one a little bit more subtle. And again, all of that is to give the illusion of distance, making this mountain look a little bit farther away than the one on the left. I do my mountains a little bit differently than Bob does. I like to feel them out as I go. I like to shape them. I like to move the paint around. I don't just plop it in there and then take a brush and smear it around. I have a different approach to it, which you'll see here in a moment. So here I'm using the same brush, but instead of dragging the paint around, I'm just going to tap it as though I'm putting in some grass. What I've found is that this works really well and keeps the texture of the mountain intact. If I just smear the paint around, I kind of lose my texture. And I like having a texture here. It adds a very, very subtle touch to the mountains, which you don't get simply by dragging the paint around. And I actually think I have more control over it this way. See, you can get that foothill look in there before you even get to the foothills. And I'm still moving the paint around. It's really no different than dragging it. I just like this better. So I'm not going to dwell on this too long. We'll move along here in a moment. I'm just refining the shape there. So now we'll get to the snow. This is not pure white. This is a value closer to the clouds. And again, I want it to look like it's further away. So the mountain on the left is going to have brighter highlights and deeper shadows. Again, the way I handle this is a little bit different than Bob. I don't like to just swipe the paint down. I don't think that looks natural. It does look good if it's done right, and the technique is very hard to get down if you're new to it. But like I was saying before, I like to feel it. I like to feel it out. I like to flesh it out, being a little bit more meticulous about where I put each little stroke. For the most part, it works really well, and I'm using Gamblin's Titanium White. This is their professional grade, which breaks beautifully. It's almost effortless. I don't have to try very hard at all to get it to break, and I can focus more on shaping the mountain the way I want. This one's coming along really well. the paint is doing exactly what I want it to do. It's not giving me any trouble. Sometimes it does. But in this case, I wasn't having any trouble with it at all. Going slow and being meticulous about it like this really helps get a sense of control under the knife. There's a certain charm to the way Bob does it so quickly, but there's just nothing in my mind telling me that I have to go that fast. This is the way I like to do it. And it gives me the results I want, so it's all good. We've got some nice shape in there. We'll move on to the next mountain here. Now with this one, I've got, like I was saying, I've got the darker shade. I'm still not sure if I don't remember if I used, it doesn't look like I'm using the straight black. It does look like I have a little bit of white in there, but it's definitely darker than the one I was using previously, and this really helps to push that other mountain back. Helps keep it looking farther away. And you're going to see me do something interesting here in a moment. When I start to highlight the mountain on the right, or I'm sorry, when I start to highlight the left mountain, I will go back to the mountain on the right and punch the highlights a little bit because I started feeling that it was a little dark. You'll see what I'm talking about when we get there. It needs to look far away, but it also needs to look like it's in the same world. And once I started to put the highlights on this mountain here, I felt like the one on the right needed a little bit of a kick. So you will see me go back and rework that right-hand mountain in a little bit. At this point, I'm really just focused on trying to get the two mountains to mesh together in terms of composition. The angles are important. What I'm doing on the inside of the mountain really isn't important, but I do still like to try and sculpt it so I can see where I might want to go with the highlights. I felt like the peak needed to be a little bit higher, so I've pushed it up. I like the idea of extending this one out in front of the other one to the right, so I've added a little bit more of it down there as well. And now, just like I did on the right, I'm going to go back through and tap the paint out with the brush. And see, by tapping, I can extend that the base of that mountain out there to the right. And a little bit later, we'll just put foothills over that and make it look like it's integrated. This is a great way of getting ready to put the highlights on because I'm giving the mountain a sense of direction. Like here I'm going down and to the right. A second ago I was going down and to the left. And that just helps me, prepare for the highlights and gives me a sense of where they need to go. And now for the highlights. Now here you're going to start to notice when I put the highlights on this one, the contrast makes the mountain in the background look a little bit dark, and that started to bother me, so this time I'm using pure white. Same approach, very slow, meticulous. I'm not pushing very hard at all. It's the same technique, it's just not anywhere near as quick as Bob would do it on the show. I like to add interest in the mountain ridges by leaving gaps, just creating different sense of plane changes and little ridges that catch the light as it wraps around the mountain. Things like that, just nice little touches you can add that add to the realism of the piece. At some point here, I think I started to try to sculpt out some other shapes within the side of the mountain because I felt like it was a little bit flat. And now that I'm looking at it again, I'm not sure I have the same idea as I did when I was actually doing it, but that's part of the beauty of the thing. You know, you just let it happen and let it be that way. Yeah, so here's where I started to go back to the other side, and I felt like I needed to make it a little bit lighter. But I didn't make the whole thing brighter, I just sort of topped it off. Mostly along the top ridge, and then a little bit down that ridge in front. Again, this is just straight titanium white, Gamblin professional artist grade titanium white. With no medium, nothing, just straight out of the tube. It's great, great stuff. See, just that little bit of white on there makes it pop. And then the image is working for me. Now for the shadow side on this mountain. I wanted to make sure it wasn't too dark because I didn't like how dark the shadows looked, so I made an effort to make it almost the same as the mountain on the right. So it's kind of an optical illusion, but the paint I'm putting down now is more or less the same value as the highlight on the other mountain. It's not quite the same, but it's close. I think the hardest part of this whole painting was making sure that the gray was the same with each new batch of paint that I mixed, because again, there's no black here. This is all blue and brown. And if I had a little bit too much brown, the tone of the gray would change, and it just wouldn't look right. If I had a certain part of it that had a bluish cast and a certain part of it that had a brownish cast, it just wouldn't look right. So I spent a lot of time making sure that the gray was neutral. Now here I'm doing what Bob normally does. This is an attempt at making the bottom of the mountain a little misty, just to set it into the painting. That's classic Bob Ross technique right there, lifting up, blending the bottom of the mountain away. Okay, well, I'll give you a little look at it, and we'll get into the foothills in the next video.